takeoff checklist complete.
US Airways Flight 1549 has just left New York's LaGuardia Airport.
Birds.
And that fast, we were just on top of them.
My aircraft.
Our aircraft.
Both of the plane's engines have stopped working.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Cactus 1549.
The plane is falling from the sky. There are only a few seconds to decide what to do.
If we can get it for you, want to try and land on runway 13.
We're unable.
155 lives depend on the pilots making the right call.
Hey, Cactus 1549, you can land runway 1 at Peterborough.
Can't do it.
With a bad option on the right and a worse one on the left, the crew decides to put their Airbus on the runway that's dead ahead.
We're going to be in the Hudson.
Mayday, mayday.
New York's LaGuardia Airport, mid-afternoon.
Please take a moment to listen to this important...
US Airways Flight 1549 is a short hop from New York City to Charlotte, North Carolina.
At least it will be a little warmer in Charlotte.
Your seat serves flotation device.
Together in the cockpit today are Captain Chesley Sullenberger, 57,
Clear to push.
and First Officer Jeffrey Skiles, 49.
We were late because the weather was bad earlier, but by this point, the weather had cleared off for our departure, and it was just puffy clouds.
28, brakes released.
Spot 28 for Cactus 1549.
150 passengers are on board the European-made Airbus A320. Businessman Clay Presley is on his way home to Charlotte.
I arrived at the airport at LaGuardia. It was very cold. It had been snowing a little bit that day, and we had a storm coming in, so we wanted to make sure we made that flight and weren't hung up or delayed on some later flights.
The crew flew in an hour earlier from Charlotte, with Sullenberger at the controls.
Your brakes, your aircraft.
First Officer Skiles will be flying the plane back to Charlotte.
My aircraft.
It's a common sharing of piloting duties.
Cactus 1549, runway 4, clear for takeoff.
Cactus 1549, clear for takeoff.
This trip marks the final leg of a 4-day sequence of flights for both men.
We made our standard call-outs. It was just a normal takeoff, normal procedures on the climb out. There was absolutely nothing at all to indicate that this would be any different than any other takeoff in my entire career.
But by the end of the day, they'll be the most famous crew on the planet.
Gear up, please.
Gear up.
Patrick Harton is one of the controllers handling traffic out of LaGuardia today. He has one of the most stressful jobs in the world.
When I sit down in front of a radar, I'm responsible for every person on every airplane under my control. And I take that responsibility very seriously.
Cactus 1549, New York departure, radar contact. Climb and maintain 15,000.
The flight will climb northeast out of LaGuardia, and then begin a slow turn south towards Charlotte.
I think I had about 3 or 4 airplanes on my frequency at that time. And it was just a normal departure. You know, it was just another flight that I've handled a million times.
Riding the thrust of 2 General Electric engines, the aircraft powers into the sky.
Cactus 1549, 700, climbing 5,000. What a view of the Hudson today.
Yeah.
After takeoff checklist complete.
Flight 1549 is traveling at almost 400 kilometers an hour. It's been in the air for just a minute and a half.
I caught something out of the corner of my eye, and slightly to our right, but still ahead of us, was a line of birds. And they were very, very close, too close for us to maneuver around. And that fast, we were just on top of them.
You can just feel the power of the plane going forward. And then all of a sudden, there was this gigantic boom. It seemed like it stopped in midair, like you hit a brick wall. And then all of a sudden, somebody said, "The left engine's on fire."
Uh-oh. Before we could even assess the situation,
We got one roll, both of them rolling back.
both engines rolled back to idle.
Ignition start.
Just 13 seconds after their problems began, Sullenberger takes control of the struggling plane.
My aircraft.
Your aircraft.
Get the QRH. Loss of thrust in both engines.
The QRH, or Quick Reference Handbook, is a step-by-step guide to dealing with emergencies.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Cactus 1549. Hit birds. We've lost thrust in both engines. We're turning back towards LaGuardia.
When a pilot says Mayday or declares an emergency, you go from a focus state to a hyper-focus state. You just focus in on the emergency itself and, figure out the solution to the problem.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left, heading 220.
220.
All of a sudden, there was a smell that came through the cabin.
Something's burning.
If fuel remaining, engine mode selector, ignition.
What I'm thinking, though, at this point is that, we're just going to have to restart an engine.
Thrust levers. Confirm idle.
Idle.
The procedure is to try to restart the engines, and I always had faith we could do that.
Airspeed optimum relay, 300 knots. We don't have that.
We don't.
Okay, Cactus 1549, if we can get it for you, you want to try and land on runway 13.
We're unable.
The conversations with Captain Sullenberger were very short and to the point, which was very appropriate for the emergency. There was a lot going on and wasn't much time to handle it. When Captain Sullenberger simply said unable, it didn't bother me. I mean, he had his hands full flying the airplane, and I understood that. So my job is just to move on to the next option.
All right, Cactus 1549, it's going to be traffic for runway 31.
Unable.
Harton still wants the jet to return to LaGuardia, but Flight 1549 is now just 1,400 feet above the ground.
Cactus 1549, runway 4 is available if you want to make left, traffic runway 4.
I'm not sure we can make any runway. What's to our right? Anything in New Jersey? Teterboro?
Okay, yeah, off to your right side is Teterboro Airport. You want to try to go to Teterboro?
Teterboro is a small airport on the New Jersey side of the Hudson River, but it's several kilometers away. And without their engines, Flight 1549 is dropping fast.
Want to try to go to Teterboro?
Yes.
When the air traffic controller pointed out Teterboro, I looked at it and I stopped, and I was kind of concerned that he was actually going to try for it. I didn't think we could make it.
So you're sitting there very quietly. People are anxiously waiting for information, and they wanted reassurance that things were going to be okay. You could hear the microphone come on.
This is the captain.
We're hoping he was going to say, "I've got this under control, we're going to be okay, we're going to make it, we're going to turn around and go back and land." That's what you were hoping to hear.
Brace for impact.
What does he mean, brace for impact? And then all of a sudden it registered. I think he's saying we're going to crash.
Get your heads down!
I had no idea about how to brace for impact. Everybody's looking around, brace for impact. What do you mean, brace for impact? And how do you brace?
Go ahead. Try number 1.
I put it back on.
Okay, put it back on. Put it back on.
While the crew struggles to fly their stricken plane, Patrick Harton is still trying to find them an airport.
I actually worked Teterboro Airport for about 3 years, so I was very familiar with the airport.
Okay, Cactus 1549, you can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
Can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus?
I could hear him, but my mind really didn't want to comprehend those words.
We're going to be in the Hudson.
That was a death sentence for him, and I didn't want to accept the fact that it was over and there were no more options left.
I don't think we're going back to LaGuardia.
I just emailed my wife and just said, "I love you." And I didn't say anything else because I really did not want her to worry.
Okay. Let's go. Put the flaps out.
And I thought to myself, great, the Hudson River was our best opportunity. It was really the only thing in sight where we could land this airplane.
Passengers throughout the plane watch the Hudson rise to meet them and begin making preparations of their own.
So I started thinking about, if we're going to crash, I know I need to figure out where the exit rows are. If the water comes in, you need to be able to hold your breath long enough to get to those 4 or 5 rows and get the doors open if you can.
Got flaps out, 250 feet in the air.
We're not going to be able to get an engine started, so I started calling out airspeeds and altitudes.
170 knots.
To give him a situational awareness of what was going on.
Got flaps 2. One more.
No, let's stay at 2. Got any ideas?
Actually, not.
We were so focused on what we were doing, and I always thought it would work out.
Below 300 feet, Patrick Harton's radar can't see the plane. Flight 1549 disappears.
When the aircraft disappeared off my radar, I just assumed that there weren't going to be any survivors.
In the cabin, the passengers prepare for the inevitable.
All the passengers really started kind of pulling together, and somebody yelled out as we were going down.
You ready at the doors?
The folks at the door says, "We're ready." I was just scared to death.
We're going to brace.
Looked like the airplane was going right for the bottom of the Hudson River. All we saw was water cascading over the windshield.
It was like a tornado. Pieces of the plane were being torn apart. Some people were thrown around pretty good.
Then the airplane popped up, and it was just sort of gently rocking in the waves.
We all just sat there. We were all in shock, and we were waiting for what's next.
US Airways Flight 1549 was in the air for just 5 minutes and 8 seconds. Having made a remarkable landing, the passengers and crew now face a new danger. The plane is leaking. The ice-cold water of the Hudson is pouring into the cabin. The crew of Flight 1549 has just performed an extremely difficult aviation feat, but they still have more work to do. Captain Sullenberger heads for the cabin, while First Officer Skiles shuts down the plane.
I stayed behind and did the evacuation checklist, and so it was probably about 45 seconds before I actually went back myself in the cabin after we landed.
In an instant, the $75 million plane has become an unlikely boat floating down the Hudson River. It's now filling with freezing water.
That water was cold. It was very cold, so your feet are freezing. People came to their senses and they said, "Get the doors open, get the doors open."
At air traffic control, Patrick Harton has no idea the plane even made it down safely.
I didn't think anyone could survive a water landing like that. They got me off position, because I was obviously in no condition to work traffic anymore.
Harton is led to his union office. Despite his ordeal, protocol demands he recount his version of events.
I really didn't want to speak to anyone. I just wanted to kind of hide under a rock. I needed my wife to know what had happened, but I knew I couldn't talk to her because it was pretty much in a fragile state and I didn't want to break down. So I sent her a simple text message. I said, "Had a crash, I'm not okay, can't talk now."
Passengers nearest the exits open the doors quickly, while Sullenberger and the cabin crew begin managing the evacuation.
I just jumped up very quickly and started making my way to the emergency door. And so I worked my way out onto the wing, just a few steps to start with. I started noticing that people around